My journey in sports pretty much started playing sports myself. Used to see my brother and my father play all the time and basically fight for my chance on the court. I mean, working at the garden was a dream.
I felt like I wish I was there at that moment.
Crazy experience. Hadn't ever seen anybody 7 feet tall.
Can we get back to talking in a language that I understand as well?
Ironically, he might be the tallest. It's obviously a unique year because of the pandemic.
Really? Was it?
So if you can just take us through how you managed to make it there and what did it take?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I made it. Took a plane. Keep networking. Keep reaching out to people. Empower yourself with the right tools and the right knowledge to make a difference and to fulfill that gap. Just don't follow the herd. You'll have to find your own pathway.
Hi guys, welcome back to an all-new episode from All About Sports, the podcast. Today's episode, you guys have your regular co-host, Rishabh, Mazhar, and myself, Shubham. But today's episode is very, very special. We are joined by a special guest, Ananya. Hi Ananya, thank you for joining us today.
Hello, guys. Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure being on this.
And to all our viewers and listeners, a little bit about Ananya. She's in global partnership for the Global Sports Business Department at Rakuten in Tokyo, Japan. She did her master's in sports management at Columbia University. She's the founder of Mabrij, a sports information hub. Runs her own sports podcast called Sportsbiz Show, which we link down in the description. So anyone wants to have a look at that, you guys can please do so. She was selected as one of the 50 young sports makers at the Global Sports Week in Paris to represent India on a global stage. Like Ananya, it's an honor to have you. It sounds really cool about everything that you've achieved in sports and what you continue to do so. So right now you're working in Tokyo. You're working at Rakuten. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? Like you got into sports management. You did that as your master's. So what was it growing up? Like, were you always interested in sports? How did you manage to understand this is what you want to take up as a career? What was that motivation for you?
Yeah, so I mean, my journey in sports pretty much started playing sports myself. Even though there's no sort of blueprint for you to get into sports by virtue of playing sports, you don't need to be an athlete necessarily. For everyone out there. But I grew up playing sports. I was a multi-sport athlete growing up. I grew up in Delhi. Used to see my brother and my father play all the time and basically fight for my chance on the court. Which was unlikely for a girl to do. But I was always interested in sports, and no one ever stopped me from playing in general. So I took on to basketball, which was a special sort of liking of mine at the time, and went on to play for my state, and then got into my undergrad SRCC in India because of basketball as well. Played there, played with the team, had the best time. That's kind of how the interest in sports just expanded. And as you grow around in India playing sports, you see certain elements that are missing, and you want to basically empower yourself with the right tools and the right knowledge to make a difference and to fulfill that gap and that void. And that's kind of how the jump to the business and the management side of sports happened. So that's me in a nutshell. I applied to Columbia Sports Management Program, got in, completed that, and then just sort of started working in sports with the hope to eventually at some point give back in a bigger way to the community back home.
So one thing that you mentioned is your time at Columbia, which I believe is a 2-year program. Am I correct?
Yes, it's a 2-year program. Depending on how smart you are, you can complete it sooner or later.
Yeah. So I like one feel that I get is a lot of kids in India nowadays are interested in sports management. They want to take it up as a career, and also they want to pursue it as a degree. So because you have been at Columbia, you've been there, done that, studied out there for 2 years. How was your experience out there in Columbia? And I would like you to answer this question thinking of a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old in mind who's perhaps wanting to pursue it. So how was your general experience out there? And how much do you think the exposure that you got has helped make you like the sort of person that you are in the sports industry today?
Yeah, there's actually a lot to unpack in that question. I remember the time very profoundly when I was 21, 22. I actually went to pursue my master's at 21. So um, it was obviously a very big turning point. Also, in developmentally, like when you're sort of in a new environment, away from home, dealing in a completely in an environment basically you haven't exposed yourself to ever. I think those challenges help you grow, and if you can empower yourself with the right skill set, that kind of is what makes the difference. Very small things. I feel like anybody who's at a very young age and starting out in their journey in sports management, just don't follow the herd. Don't have a sheep mentality, in the sense that the program or any even a company won't come and make you successful. You'll have to find your own pathway, whether that's finding the right tools, finding the right internships. I remember volunteering for almost every conference that happened in New York. And this was me just going on Google and typing next conference, next week, sports business, sports marketing, like typing like two keywords, three keywords, whatever popped up. Took the subway, traveled to the conference, or wrote them a cold email multiple times saying, hey, I'll volunteer, I'll do it for free. I'm starting out, I know nothing about the industry right now. Let me learn, give me an opportunity to learn. I know everyone can't work for free, but these are just like little things you can do. If you're spending 1 hour doing something completely useless, just utilize that time a little productively. Maybe you can, right, for free as well. So basically little things like that, that kind of make the difference for a young person, a 21 or 22-year-old. And then you sort of build your resume, you build your CV, which you can then take to your first internship, and then your second internship, and then from there take that to a full-time, a company that you hopefully can hire you.
One question, Ananya. I know you worked at Madison Square Garden, you
Yeah.
interned there, and I've listened to your podcast where you spoke about it, where you did that interview with someone from your university, if I'm not wrong. I remember in that you mentioned that it was a very enlightening experience to see all these basketball players just passing by at Madison Square Garden. So, firstly, I myself am a huge basketball fan. I myself have played for several years. So, I could really feel that connect, and I felt like I wish I was there at that moment. So take us through a bit of that journey of working at the mecca of sports in the US, and also what was the decision behind you deciding to come back instead of trying to pursue something in the US itself?
Yeah, I mean, working at the garden was a dream. I'm not going to, sugarcoat this, but it was difficult. Like the first time I applied to work as an intern at the garden, I got rejected. So it wasn't, that the first time I applied and I got in. I worked I worked on my CV. I built my resume, uh, built my contacts, and then leveraged that everything together to then apply for another round at the garden. And then a couple of rounds later, I finally made the cut. So I worked as an account management intern. For the uninitiated, that's basically working with clients who sponsor the games, who sponsor the property. So you'll see like basically contractual assets of Chase Bank and basically sponsors all around the garden. So that's kind of what an account management intern or associate would do. They manage those relationships with clients, and that was again a great first position to work in. And by virtue of that, I obviously got to hang out a lot on the court, just to make sure everything is running smoothly, all the clients are happy, taking them to the games, bringing them back to the arena, seeing them off and things of that nature. So I by virtue of that, I saw a lot of players pass by. Crazy experience. Hadn't ever seen anybody 7 feet tall. I didn't even know if that's possible. I mean, you see them on TV, but then you're like, he can't be that tall, right? But they are that tall, probably taller, and hugely built. So it was a little intimidating, but I survived. But overall, yeah, I think again at the internship as well. Don't like I would just give this advice is for people to not slack off. Like at every internship now, from the garden, I had to apply for a full-time job or get another internship. So like the ball was always rolling, and I think those were the tougher challenges. When you get to a place is hard. But what after that? And no one's ever going to stop asking you that question. I'm sure with you guys as well, like what's next? So those are the kind of challenges that come with topping up an internship or topping up a gig that you get.
Definitely. No, Ananya, as Mazhar said, he's like the baller on the podcast. So at some point with All Star Week coming up, at some point when the world opens up, I think you'll have to do a 3-point contest or something of the sort. Dunk contest,
It's
I don't.
on.
Yeah.
It's on. Are
I
you are
know
you
Mazhar
are you 3 point
3 point shoot.
shooter, Mazhar?
Yes, I was. That was my bread and butter. So that's one thing I take pride in.
Nice,
So
nice. I'm yeah. I won't call myself a 3 point expert, but I think I'm better at drive-ins. But we'll see. We'll have a one-on-one and we'll work things out.
I was trying to I was trying to play the Mazhar's advantages. I wasn't sure what position you played, but I figured I'd play
Okay,
the
can we get back to talking in a language that I understand as well?
Mazhar's.
Right.
No,
Ananya,
but
I'm not much of a basketball person, so that's why.
ironically, he might be the tallest. Are you the tallest of?
He is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're about the tallest of amongst the three of us on the call today for sure.
If
But
you were in India, they'd say you're wasting your height. They'd be like, "You're so tall, just play basketball." Like that's their one way to figure out who'll be good or not. But yeah.
I know, I know. No, Ananya, I was gonna say you've worked. You've talked about both working, studying, or looking for opportunities in the sports industry, and in India, US, and now in Japan as well. I wanted to ask just broadly, what are some of the differences that you see culturally in terms of how people react to the sports industry, both in terms of types of opportunities, types of work, any broad cultural differences you see in terms of how people interact, how the sports industry works across these countries for people who are looking for opportunities in India, looking to go outside India. What are some of the distinctions maybe that you would draw on from your experiences?
Yeah, in general, I think there obviously are a lot of differences between all countries. Especially Japan, which is super cultural. The world sort of respects and talks about bunko, which is culture in Japan. And then on the other hand, you have the US, which again is the epitome of business and sports and management and sports and marketing and media. The madman world of New York. And then you'll have India, which is a growing nation for sports, developing economy, and in the sports side as well. Of course, with like the advent of leagues, we know how fast sports has become and how fast paced it's become. um, Culturally, there are a lot of differences in the sense that I feel still on the development side in India, we're lacking a lot on the tech aspect of things, where we aren't sort of deploying the right tools and strategies to necessarily pick out the right talent and put them on a pedestal, or train them through the years. So that strategic thinking and kind of giving it the long term vision is maybe less in India compared to other countries. Like when I look at a Japan, almost all companies here have a 5 year plan. So, every move that they make needs to account for 5 years, not just the next 2 years, but 5 years. So that's what culturally differentiates it from anything else, not just in sports business, but you look at any business across any industry in Japan, and it plays a role in sports as well. So any of the leagues that have picked up in Japan, like they've sort of within Asia have made a huge impact through their leagues and through their work, right? And some of the world's biggest sponsors you see are Japanese companies, right? In the world of football, and now of course they've penetrated in basketball as well. So that's the Japanese and the Indian side difference. But yeah, I mean, India's a land of potential. Youth is driving the nation. So there's more to be optimistic about for India than any other country, I feel. I mean, I can't speak to a lot of countries, but yeah, when I speak to the countries I know of, the US in general, again, like I said, I think things are pretty much, they'll always keep developing, they'll always keep improving. That's for sure. That's a given. But I seems like there's a lot more opportunity to tap into in India in terms of uncovering the next stage than the US in sports.
And I think Ananya also, I think from what even a lot of the work that you do with your podcast, I think is untapping a lot of sports in India that are outside of cricket as well. Just looking at sports more broadly, that's a huge area of opportunity in India that hopefully will grow, and there is a lot of room to grow. So everyone is probably all of us at least on this call are super excited for that.
Yeah, so just wanted to ask you, so it's really intriguing that you made it to Rakuten, your entire journey. So if you can just take us through how you managed to make it there and what did it take? And obviously language would have been a huge barrier. And again, living all there by yourself. So take us through that journey as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I made it. Took a plane. No, that's a bad joke. Please don't put that in. Um, I
That will be a
basically.
teaser for the episode.
Oh no, I shouldn't have said that. Um, so I no coming back to things that will actually help people listening to this. I think it obviously, like any other fresh graduate, I did my masters and I was looking for a job, and I was applying at a lot of places. And one thing I would look back and do differently is I would strategize better. Again, it comes back to like just planning ahead. Even though doing is as important, I feel just taking some time to think and strategize as to what your key skills are and strengths are. Like I say this a lot, I've said this before, so at the risk of repeating myself, but like preparing a SWOT of yourself, your your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities that you can hold for yourself in the future, the trends that you see, and what would not work out in your favor, if at all, like anything that you can predict, of course. So sort of preparing that blueprint for yourself, like treating yourself as an organization, as a company, and preparing a blueprint for yourself, seeing what are your key skills. Like as a fresh graduate, firstly, also don't pressurize yourself that you'll know everything, or you need to go to a company that's going to expect you to know everything. There's going to be a lot of things that you're going to learn, and your positions might change as well in the company. Right, so it's like, again, whatever you're suited for, like Mazhar, like a basketball example, sorry Shubham, but if you're playing as a point guard, you're most likely to stick to it. But if you're playing number one, right, and then if you have to become number two, if you have to sort of become a shooting guard at the same time, or show up for your team, you have to call out shots, you can't always stick to that one position. So it's just about sort of maneuvering and putting the player in the position that they're most likely to win in. So um basically preparing, like practically preparing a blueprint for yourself and seeing what works out. And I wasn't necessarily stopping myself from just staying in the US. I feel like maybe that's where people stick to the status quo. I think if you've gone abroad, try to explore other options as well. If you've gone to a UK or gone to the US, maybe there are other areas in the world that can be opened up for you, not just that place you're in, because maybe that's saturated in some ways. For you at at that time, at that place is not the right opportunity for you. So don't be afraid to just move out. I mean, that's your one advantage as a young professional, where you can explore what you're good at, different areas, different countries, different roles. 10 years down the line, that won't matter as much as the exploration part. So that's kind of what worked in the favor.
Talking about the role that you
That's
mentioned,
powerful.
that obviously you got to take up whatever opportunity you get, especially as a young graduate. So you got a chance to become like to work for global partnership. So can you explain a little bit more about what you do, and what does your role really entail?
Sure. So global sports business is basically the sports business arm of Rakuten Sports, associate more with, the revenue and the business generation side of Rakuten, which is an e-commerce company at its heart. Started in 1997 in Tokyo, and they're into, 70 plus businesses across 35 countries. So sports business is one of those verticals. I personally work under the global partnerships team, and this team basically leads the activation side of the business. So there's athletes who whose IP rights we own. So across Japan and Southeast Asia, recently signed a deal with an upcoming star in basketball in Japan. So not just restricted to basketball, but of course expanding business across all sports. So the partnerships arm is basically sort of servicing the sales aspect of the business, as well as the client side of the business, with content generation and things of that nature. On the other hand, there's a lot of interesting content that Rakuten creates, slightly away from the partnerships team, but there's been content on Stephen Curry called The Rising. It's on YouTube. It's also on our Sports OTT channel, which has got a lot of content on Andres Iniesta and a couple of other athletes. So that's another kind of side to the business of Rakuten Sports, global sports business vertical.
And just
Finally,
so
Shubham became happy. He heard a name he knew.
I know. I'm sure he was excited once he saw the Barcelona. It's the Rakuten. If I'm not mistaken, is still the jersey. I had to look a picture up to
Yeah.
confirm it's still the jersey sponsor for Barca. But go
Yes.
ahead, Malu. Sorry.
Yeah, so Ananya, just a follow-up question now, because you've been working in the industry in Japan, and you have also been through that journey, like being a young graduate, getting yourself a job. So in general, like for young graduates, when they're looking for a job, what are the most like available jobs in the sports industry, and what are the key skills that you think young graduates, even after graduating, should perhaps continue to build on in order to land these jobs? So would you have any insight on that?
Yeah,
It
don't
can be
slack
the Japan
off.
industry or any other industry that you like, any country. It doesn't have to be country
Yeah.
specific.
Yeah, no, I'd say don't slack off. Like, I was doing this in the initial phase of just like, patting myself on the back, saying, phew, I finally got a job. Like, let's just relax. I feel like that's the worst mistake one can do, because the world moves on, they don't stop for you. So, and your skills, like, the industry is changing again, like you said, not just sports, but all industries are changing in general. And they're moving at such a fast pace, like how AI is going to take over, the HR recruitment space, or how performance analytics is sort of removing jobs for scouts. So the whole atmosphere is changing. So you have to constantly upskill yourself. Also, on not just on the this is on the more hard skill side, right? Depending on whatever you do, but also on the soft skill side, never stop networking. Like if you still get an opportunity to, of course not, maybe after you get a job you don't volunteer at a conference, but go and attend as many conferences as possible. There's so much going on now, obviously online, which is a little easier to attend. But keep networking, keep reaching out to people, keep networking with the contacts you've already built in the past as well, and try to learn a little bit from everyone. And I feel like also focus a lot on actually consuming versus we this mentality of just creating. I feel like creating is amazing, but also make sure that you match that up with consuming as much. And I feel like people don't do that enough, but that's one thing that every young grad or anybody in general should do, especially in the sports space, because it's just like changing at the speed of light.
That's really great advice, Ananya. I want to also ask, you're based in Japan right now. Olympics coming up right now, scheduled for July 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. What I wanted to ask you, it's obviously a unique year because of the pandemic.
Really? Was it?
Yeah, I don't know if anyone knew. I don't know if anyone found out.
I think it
But
was okay. Normal.
whether, but I wanted to ask, in that context, I wonder if you're able to at all get an understanding of how people are feeling about it in Japan. I think there's always some amount of complexity on whether big sporting events are good for the country that's hosting it or not. That's a issue to its own. But I want to generally get an idea from you, from people that you may talk to. Is there the same buzz about the Olympics? How are people feeling about it? Are there any varying opinions just given the economic impacts of COVID? Or is it just the same? Because I know Beijing before the Olympics was an extremely high energy. I know London was extremely high energy, Rio as well. What is the scene like kind of in Japan leading up to the Olympics?
Honestly, the excitement levels aren't at the stage where you'd expect them to be for the Olympics. I think because of everything that's happened in the past year, um, it's obvious. I think it's obviously killed energy a little bit for people, and also there's so much uncertainty that people don't know whether they have to go full out or what to expect. I mean, we don't know if the Olympics are happening for we aren't certain about it. So I think from an expectancy standpoint, people just don't know what's coming their way and whether it's coming at all. So I feel in that sense the energy levels aren't at the optimum, but we're in the hopes that as weeks pass by, and as we get closer to July, and hopefully borders start opening to let the contingents in and the teams in, things will start changing. It's going to be an automatic shift. So there's no, and it's going to be, well, Sakura is going to end at the time, but it's still going to be beautiful. The atmosphere and the buzz around the Olympics is always great. It's the biggest event people look forward to. So I certainly hope that it takes place because of all the effort and the work that's gone into it by the team here, by authorities world over, especially Japan's authority. So I really hope personally that it happens, and I think the wave will change accordingly.
No, that definitely makes sense. The second question I had from you is, you talked a little bit about some of the sporting talent that's coming out of, especially from a basketball perspective, that's coming out of Asia. I wanted, see if we could get some names so that we can pretend like we were scouting these guys the entire time. So like if they ever become famous, we can be like, yeah, we knew about this dude from way back.
Yeah, and just get some royalty. Just put this video and say like, as someone probably watched this and then scouted you. So yeah,
Yeah,
we'll just get some
exactly,
royalty. Just like
exactly.
good thinking, high thinking. Why not?
That's what but I want to ask, you're a baller. How is how you probably know people in India as well who are potentially pursuing basketball. Um, how do you think the opinion of basketball has changed in India? We had Satnam Singh getting drafted into the NBA. Are there more opportunities for basketball specifically in India? I know you're talking a little bit more about broadly in Asia. Now we've seen a couple of Japanese players as well making it into the NBA, doing pretty well for Toronto and Washington. Um, is it growing in India as well? Do you think kind of similarly to how it's growing in Southeast Asia? Demand, I think, is. I'm not sure playing has seen the same growth as when you were playing.
I think there's small changes that have happened. So I remember from my time traveling for at least national level games, playing for the state, the conditions at which they obviously had players, or the routine, or the scheduling around that has become better to a certain extent. But outside of that, things are yet to change to a level where we see more Satnam Singhs coming out of India. On the women's side, though, there can be more scope and more that can be done. I think just the level of competition and the gap can be bridged faster. At where women stand on a, when you compare them physically and when you compare them skill wise, there's a lot of opportunities on the women's basketball side in India. In fact, a lot of people have been selected to play at the highest division of the NCAA, women's players. So in that sense, I personally back women's sports, women's basketball specifically in India. On the men's side, I think we need a more cultural shift. Of course, like we're interested in watching basketball, but are we watching Indian basketball at all? I mean, we're all always consuming the NBA, right? Even in India, and we're talking about the NBA, and we talk about the players, and we know their stats at the back of our hands. Players who do watch it spiritual, like regularly, religiously. But I don't know if we're ready to adopt or even like small example, right? We had, like, let's just talk purely India basketball, starting with college basketball, right, which is sort of the next step to a lot of where these national level players go to, or they'll go to these sports academies in India. You used to see back in the day, maybe 20 years back, a Hindu versus Stephens had crowds full, right? Like stadiums full, packed, people watching like two colleges compete against each other. You don't even see a few people come and attend games unless, of course, it's sort of uh, blasted across social media, and then there's some sort of attraction within the event, and then you'll have people come and watch it. But it's a rarity. So small things like that. So unless the culture kind of changes from that grassroots, I don't think having as many academies or things like that would make a genuine difference um, to sort of change Indian basketball. We'll have one-off players for sure, because again, talent cannot be missed. So I'm sure NBA or the world's biggest leagues will scout them and take them. But again, like, do we need one-off, and is that enough?
Absolutely, I'm guilty of that too. Watching a lot of NBA, but maybe not promoting our Indian talent. I can admit to
Yeah.
being guilty
Yeah.
of that too. Yep.
No, I absolutely agree with what you just said on right now. The thing with India is we need a lot more development on the grassroots level. And with that, there has to also be a lot of support from like the local community to encourage these athletes and to like motivate them, support them, and like go for their games, cheer them instead of just following everything that's happening in the West. But yeah, all in all, I would like to say thank you so much for everything that you shared with us. It feels so nice to talk to someone who's such a sports enthusiast, who's academically studied sports, is now working in the sports industry, for all your insights that you shared, the advice that you've given to everyone, all our viewers and listeners. So thank you so much for taking time out and joining us. And it was absolutely lovely to hear your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope anything that I shared can be leveraged and can be sort of helpful for anybody listening. And I wish you all the best as well. You're doing a great job with the podcast. So good luck with that.
Thank you,
Thank
Ananya.
you.
Thanks so much. Thanks.